Okay. For those of you that are here and for those of you that are going to watch later on YouTube, welcome to the 6th lecture for human motor control and learning. We've covered a lot thus far in the course, and today is the last sort of motor control lecture. Today we're going to be discussing two different things. We're going to be discussing attention and memory. Those are the two different topics of today's lecture, and let's get started. This is going to be the breakdown of, there you go. You can all see the PowerPoint slides? Just to confirm. Yeah, awesome. So this is going to be the breakdown of the lecture. In terms of attention, we're going to talk about different attention theories and how research has looked at assessing attention demands and how humans are able to focus attention in different aspects internally and externally. We're going to finish off with talking about memory and sort of I'm not sure if you've had any memory knowledge or study any of the other courses that you've taken, but we're going to discuss sort of like the structure of memory, how it works physiologically, and then how research has learned to take the way that memory is and maximize the memory of motor skills. So let's first start off with talking about attention. When behavioral psychologists or the early motor control researchers started analyzing people performing motor skills, they very quickly observed that the preparation for and performance of motor skills are influenced by a seemingly limited capacity to select to and attend to different information. And so what does this mean? This means that when we are talking about attention, we're talking about two different aspects when it is applied to skill performance. When we're talking about what someone is attending to or what is their attention while they're performing a motor skills, we could be talking about what they're paying attention to in their head as they perform the motor skill. So as I'm hitting a baseball, I am paying attention to what the coach said in terms of the way the pitcher is going to pitch the ball, for example. Attention could mean what the person is focusing in on, what their mind is focusing in on as they're performing a motor skill. The term attention is also used as sort of a way to describe the amount of effort required for someone to perform a skill. Because when we're talking about attention as sort of a limiting capacity in our ability to perform motor skills, we're talking about an observation that as we try to do multiple things at once, there tends to be a problem in completing all of those tasks. So we're going to be discussing a lot about multitasking, but researchers, when sort of assessing attentional demands of participants or performers doing different motor skills, they wanted to analyze what people were sort of attending to when they're simultaneously performing multiple tasks, as well as they wanted to look at if there was a difference between beginners and experts in what they would be attending to as they're performing a motor skill. So we talked earlier about beginner versus expert drivers or sort of experienced drivers, that their eyes tend to focus on less things for a short amount of time as they get better at driving, for example. Or in that Ronaldo video of the soccer video from 2 lectures ago, Ronaldo was able to strike the ball when the lights were turned off, whereas the amateur Ronald was not able to. Ronaldo was able to pick out from the environment what was required to complete the skill much quicker. So researchers has also looked at if there's differences in what people attend to, in this case visually, as they're improving in motor skill. So, like I said, the first topic of attention or research in attention while performing motor skills was sort of focused at this concept or this observation that people tend to have impairments when they're trying to perform multiple skills at once. Even though they could be good at each of the skills individually, when you're starting to combine them, all of a sudden there's a detriment, which is interesting, right? If we've learned that motor control theories, we have a motor program, what is it about doing multiple things at once that limits our performance? This was even detailed in a study in 1890, so centuries ago. And this researcher was noted that when people were having mental effort, their grip strength decreased. And so overall, what researchers found is that when participants are multitasking or performing multiple things at once, there are 3 different possibilities. That the person could be able to complete all of the tasks with no difficulties or no performance impairment. The performer may be able to complete one task, but the other task isn't complete as well, or the performer can't complete any of the tasks. Samantha has a comment: the inability to focus and master a singular task. Oh, you're answering my question. Yeah. Right. So clearly there is an amount of an attention that people are able to utilize. And it seems as though when you're performing multiple tasks, even though individually you can complete them, when it's combined, there's not enough attention for the brain to complete multiple tasks. So all of these studies sort of pointed to attention as a sort of task limiting variable. Here we have an example of multitasking research. This was taken from a news show. Oh. There you go.
It was hard for Shirley Jefferson to distinguish whether she forgot something or never really absorbed it in the first place.
And then I found out that all these things what I was having with multitasking and so forth, I wasn't.
You got this, Shirley.
Paying attention.
We all do it, but research shows multitasking drains the brain. Several studies looked at MRIs of the brain in action and found there's finite space for tasks that require attention.
It turns out when they look at functional MRI evaluations of multitasking, the overall brain activity actually decreases when you multitask. So you're not storing anything and you're doing neither item well.
Everything seems to go okay when you add a second task to what you're doing. The brain can divide and conquer, but research suggests once you add a third, things start to go downhill and more mistakes are made.
My theory would be that some of that information, as you're shifting from one idea or area to another, and because of that shift, you're wasting energy.
Dr. Michael Robb is a geriatrician who specializes in memory problems. He finds older people are extremely concerned with maintaining their memory. They could take a cue from Shirley, who brushed up on her skills.
Most important thing to me was it told me to pay more attention. That's what we tend to get lazy memory habits and say, oh, well, that's part of getting old.
Turns out age may not be the biggest culprit. Seniors might be asking too much of themselves, taking on too many things at once.
What happens is the overall measurement of brain activity goes down when you start to multitask.
For Lee Memorial Health System, I'm Amy Osher.
So maybe with multitasking, the finite amount of attention that we have is being too dispersed, and so there's not enough attention in any one thing to complete the task. Does that make sense? Benjamin's got us. This is why I burn pancakes every time I cook breakfast for dinner. It's too busy worrying about the bacon. Oh, it's true. It's true. So let's talk about the theories that people sort of developed earlier on, and then we'll talk about the newer ones, about sort of understanding attention as this like sort of limiting capacity. So when people are doing multiple things at once, there tends to be a problem. So initial theories were called bottleneck theories. And what they propose is that people have difficulty doing multiple tasks simultaneously because there is an issue with serially processing multiple stimuli, meaning that there's one area of the brain that can only process one thing at a time. So therefore creating a bottleneck. That's what's called a bottleneck theory. So here we have a sort of hypothetical schematic of what the brain is doing or what the brain would look like. And we would have this sort of area that's able to detect all of our sensory information. So detect information internally, externally, but the processing of the information coming in could only happen one at a time. So with Benjamin, if it was a sort of bottleneck theory, you would be focusing in on the pancakes, trying to flip them. Okay, yep, you're able to process the information about the pancakes, and then okay, so now I'm going to go look at my home fries, and then you have to process that, but you can't simultaneously process what's going on with the pancakes, for example. When you get really good at a task, you pay more attention or less. You only have an amount of attention. The amount of attention that you have to require for each task is less for a shorter amount of time. So your attention switching quicker. Does that make sense? So the problem with these bottleneck theories is that that's actually not true. Like one sort of hypothetical question that researchers asked early on was this concept of the cocktail party phenomenon. Has anyone ever heard of that term before? And so what it means is that when you're at a cocktail party, or you're just at the club or at your friend's house, or you're at a party, and you're talking to someone and you're conversing with them. So I'm talking to Ahmed, we're talking about whatever, and me and him are having a conversation, right? I'm attending to this conversation. So really, if in case of bottleneck theories, I would be selecting that to deal with. Now, what happens if behind me, I hear my name being called out, or I can hear someone talking behind my back or talking shit? My ears would immediately perk up and my attention will switch to take that in or to find out what's going on behind me. So what that means is that it sort of cancels out this idea of bottleneck theories, or that our brain serially processes information. What this means is that I'm clearly processing other things, but I'm choosing to focus in some way on one aspect. So researchers had to come up with a new theory that would explain the fact that we can process multiple things at once or at the same time or simultaneously. It's just that we will choose what to attend to. Does that make sense? Attention theories need to explain the fact that we can purposefully orientate our attention, and we're also able to block out things that we don't want to pay attention to. There it goes. So the next round of attention theories were called central resource capacity theories. And so what these suggested was that there was a central resource of attention, and there was of a finite capacity. And so this idea with multitasking is that there's a central amount of attention, and that each task requires an amount of attention. And as long as there is enough attention available for all of the tasks, there's no limitation in multitasking. So here we have like sort of the amount of attention hypothetically available as a circle. And here we have two tasks. One would take this amount of attention, driving a car, and then this task would take this amount of attention. This is talking with a passenger. So in this case, Ahmed and Casey, would there be an ability to multitask, or would there be performance detriment or impairment? So to be able to do it. Then. Yeah. Yep. Exactly. I think about everything. So, of the central resource theories that were sort of being developed, the most important one, or the most popular one that came to light, was Kahneman's attention theory. And the reason why this was the most important of the central resource capacity theories was that it was the first one and the main one that discussed the fact that our amount of attention is flexible. It can increase and decrease based on our mood or our arousal level. So first thing in the morning, when you first wake up, you're probably unable to multitask all at once. You need to sort of wake up and you know, get the mind going. What happens if you're super stressed? Does anyone, okay, so Ben, you're trying to make pancakes, home fries, bacon, and coffee, and now your girl is calling you and blowing up with you on the phone. You're stressing out. Are you going to be able to complete all of those things? Probably not. Probably not, yeah. You're going to selectively attend to not your girlfriend. But this sort of highlights a fact that we can all agree on, is that the amount of attention that we can provide to one or multiple tasks tends to be flexible. It's going to be based on our sort of arousal level, right? And so what they suggested was that this arousal level was going to be based on sort of like time of day, our stress level, but that there was a sort of middle ground where we would have the most amount of attention available. So you're too stressed, you have less attention. Too groggy, also less attention. There's a middle ground. Does that make sense, everyone? Say that again, Samantha. So you are saying it's a selective process for attending to one task. Well, too many questions at once. During stress. Do you want to come on the mic and ask me?
Sure. I'm just because you were explaining it, like during stress, is someone supposed to be like selectively attending to one task? Is that just the brain's way of like coping with those?
Think of it this way. Like, let me go back a couple slides. So if you think about this as the amount of sort of attention available, if you're too stressed, the amount or the circle decreases, and if you are not stressed, or you took a Red Bull and your mind's going, you have more attention available. So the amount of attention that we can utilize in terms of a capacity increases or decreases based on our arousal level. So you may be able to multitask these two things when you're not stressed, but if you're stressed and then the amount of attention decreases, you may not be able to.
Okay, thank you.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
If it doesn't, let me know. Because you're talking about selective process of what to attend to. I'm not sure what you mean by that.
Well, when you said, you were just saying like you specify on task, like when they're on their phone with their girlfriend and the girlfriend yelling, you focus on making the pancakes instead of what they're saying. Like I just was trying to make.
No, it's just that when like, so for example, if he's getting yelled at on the phone, his stress level is going to rise, and so he's going to be less able to multitask because now he has less of an available amount of attention that he can divide up between multiple tasks.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Is that okay? What do you mean, Casey? Or are you just answering for Samantha? Okay, yeah. We are going to talk about selective attention in the next bunch of slides, Samantha. Perfect. So the other thing that Kahneman's attention theory brought up is that there tends to be sort of a hierarchy or 3 general rules of the things that naturally draw our attention. When we're multitasking, we tend to sort of split up our attention or divide it up to ensure that we're at least completing one task. So there's usually something when you're multitasking that you're focusing in on the most. The next thing is that we tend to divert our attention to things that are sort of novel for the situation or that draw our attention. So like hearing your name, because that's personal to us or it's an enduring disposition, it tends to draw our attention. As we're sort of like focusing, we will divert some attention naturally to that. Or things that are novel in the situation, novel to the situation means like something like loud noises or a weird noise or a bright sound, a loud noise or a bright light, something that is very unique or novel to the situation, out of norm, tends to draw our attention. And then the last thing is that we can allocate our attention according to things that we have decided we were going to self-direct our attention to. So, for example, I'll get back to the sort of sporting example. We were talking about like baseball, what someone's attending to while they're performing different motor skills. I could tell myself, okay, focus on the ball, focus on the ball, focus on the ball, focus on the ball, as I'm performing a motor skill. And because I've been telling myself, I've chosen that I want to direct attention to that, I can self-select where to direct my attention to. Or if the coach, let's say I was playing golf, trying golf, practicing golf, and I have a golf coach, and they were saying, when you are going to swing, always make sure that you look at the ball. Even when you're about to swing, don't take your eyes off the ball. I can tell myself how to allocate that attention or to do that. Does that make sense? Awesome. Sam, is that okay?
Could you explain the enduring dispositions again, please?
Yep. So enduring dispositions means that we will things will draw our attention if they're meaningful to us or sort of novel for the situation. So the cocktail party phenomenon, you're choosing to attend to completion of one task, you're choosing to have a conversation with someone, but hearing your name, because that's personal to you, will automatically draw our attention. Or if, let's say, I'm talking to someone at a party and then a firecracker goes off, that's going to draw my attention, and probably everyone else's, because it's unique to the situation. Because research was trying to look at, okay, so if we consider attention as sort of a finite amount, how do we choose how to divvy it up? Does that make sense?
Definitely, yes. Thanks.
So since then, well, also just personal preferences, I suppose, right? Yeah, yep, yeah, because it's enduring to you. So like whatever is personal to you is important to you, right? So the sort of the flexible attention capacity limits is sounds like exactly sort of what's going on. Newer sort of attention theories have discussed this idea of multiple resource theories, where there is sort of multiple pools, or if there's like a capacity or an amount of attention, we can allocate it differently based on different types of processing or the information that needs to be processed. So maybe we'll have a certain amount of pool available for sensory input, a certain amount for response input, an amount for type of memory. So it's a more sort of detailed look at, okay, this task involves this amount of processing of this area, this amount of processing of this area, and this amount of processing of this area. So it's just more of a more complicated look at how the attention demands required of each of the different tasks. Does that make sense? We're not really discussing any of them in this course, but this is what the current level of research is looking at. So when we wanted to analyze multitasking and sort of assessing attention demands of different tasks in research, the typical procedure is called the dual task procedure, doing two tasks at once. And what you're doing is you are sort of studying the simultaneous performance of two tasks, and you're going to have a primary task completed and see how well you did. And then you're going to complete two tasks at once and see if the performance of the first task while performing the secondary task changes. So maybe it is the same, or maybe the performance of the first task decreases. That means that you were unable to multitask completely doing both at once. So that's a way to assess the demands of the second task and whether or not it would affect the first task. Does that make sense? So you could do a whole bunch of different skills at once and see, okay, this one clearly takes a lot of attention, this one doesn't, right? You could do, I don't know, you could do like with this study. Do we all remember in 2008, how old were you? All 5? Is there a difference between tasks that are kinesthetic versus cognitive? Yep. In terms of, think of it like overtly, the general way to think about it is that every type of task would take a certain amount of attention. Okay, so let's say looking at it from one measure, riding a bike takes this amount of attention, and playing piano takes this amount of attention. Multiple resource theories are looking at that there's multiple pools of attention, and so kinesthetic skills would have this amount of attention in these different fields, and cognitive would have a different amount of attention in each different sort of field or variable. I guess so it depends on the way that you are looking at it. If you're looking at it from a central resource capacity, as you get better and better at something, the amount of attention required decreases. So depending on how much attention is required of all 5 tasks, you could be able to complete them. If you're looking at it from a multiple resource theory aspect, you would have to look at, okay, well, of all of the different 5 tasks, combined, is there enough available attention in each of the different categories to be able to complete them? But we're going to learn at the end of this part of the lecture that as you get better and better at something, you can utilize less attention. That's why you can multitask better with skills that you've mastered versus skills that you're starting to learn. So do we all remember when Bluetooth, I don't know if you do you all remember when Bluetooth technology just started and it was starting to come into the cars? Yeah, and so there was a study in 2008 that wanted to analyze multitasking of driving and talking in a car. So what they wanted to do was they wanted to look at a drive simulator and assess like someone's driving ability, and then have a study that would, and then look at whether or not them talking on the phone hands-free or with a handheld unit or with talking with someone in the car, how that would affect their performance. And what they found was that there was no significant difference in talking on the phone in your hand or talking on Bluetooth when driving the car, meaning that both led to the same decrease in performance. So what that meant was, I don't know, maybe Matthew remembers it, and maybe Benjamin, or maybe Alexis, but there was a point in time where some states, it was illegal to talk on the phone, whether or not it was Bluetooth or handheld in the vehicle, because of studies like this. And then eventually it just became common practice. What this study also found was that when you were driving and having a conversation with someone also in the car, that did not lead to a decrease in performance. And what could that be? What would be a reason for that? So a conversation with someone on the phone, regardless of handheld or hands-free, would limit driving ability, but not a conversation with someone in the car. So it is, so with Ahmed, it's less processing in a sense. And it's because when you are with someone in a car, you're both sort of observing the same environment. And so if someone ran from the car, or a stop sign came up, or you had to react to an accident, you both have shared awareness of the environment. And so you both would react. So if something happened, you would stop talking and focus on that. If you're talking on the phone and other crazy stuff is happening, the weather's bad, now it's harder because it's more processing, because the person talking to you on the phone doesn't recognize that it's a scary environment. Yeah, so you kind of, it's shared awareness of the task. So how many of you are, when it's, I don't know if you guys are talking on the phone in the car, and then all of a sudden the weather gets really bad and you have to hang up the phone? You say, I gotta call you back, I gotta focus on driving. How many times have you, right? Everyone, probably. Now, how many times have you been in the car with someone and it starts getting really bad? How many times do you have to say, sorry, I'm just focusing on driving here, and tell the person to shut up beside you? No, you all of a sudden both like, whoa, oh my God, look at that. You're all of a sudden both reacting to the environment. Yeah, exactly, Alexis.
Question. I don't know. A meme just popped up into my head. It's like,
A meme? Okay, go.
Yeah, a meme. It's like, you know that meme? It's like where people are driving, and when they try to look for like a house, they turn down their music in the car.
Yeah, that's exactly what.
Is that what kind of is happening?
Yeah. It's because they're trying to focus their attention on what they're doing.
All right, that makes sense.
Yeah. So then, now let's talk about the fact that if we can choose how to focus our attention, right? So that process of changing our attention to different areas in the environment, or internally versus externally, is called attention switching. So we can have a attentional focus, meaning we can focus our attention on different things, and we can switch that area of attention focus, and that's called attention switching. So how many of you have ever been having a conversation with someone, or like you're listening in class, but something stressful is going on in your life, and so someone's talking to you and you're thinking in your head about something, you're conversing with yourself about something that happened, right? And then the person you're conversing with says, hey, are you listening? And you're not, because your attentional focus is internal in this aspect. Or you're talking to someone and like a very sexy person walks by, or I don't know, like a cool car or something, and then your attention is focusing in on that, and all of a sudden you stop paying attention. And the person's like, hello, hello. We can focus our attention on different things. We can have a narrow or wide area of focus, so we can have a width of focus, or we can have a direction of focus, meaning externally or internally. So, or when you're thinking about when you're going to say something. Yeah, exactly. Actually, like think about when people that they're not really listening to you, you're having an argument and they're just trying to think about the rebuttal, even they're not listening to what you have to say. Yeah. So do I understand that this whole idea of our ability to focus attention? We can have a wide focus, we can have a narrow focus, we can have an external focus, and we can have an internal focus. And sometimes switching focus to something can lead to performance detriment because it can be inappropriate. So when you're having a conversation with someone and then you start focusing about something else, something externally, or you're thinking about it in your head, it's causing the performance detriment in the conversation. We talked about, so is that the, Alex is asking, is that almost like the opposite of the inverted U principle? So an increase in arousal can also equal less performance? Let's see. No, it would be that are you talking about internal stuff, or it's like, so you're focusing your attention. So the inverted U is more about the amount of attention that we have, whereas attentional focus and attentional switching is talking about, of that attention that we have, what we're choosing to focus in on. So in relation to motor skills, is it better to have an internal or external sort of focus? We've talked about this before, and in regards to like sort of choking in sports, it's better to have an external sort of focus. So you're focusing more on the goal. When you focus internally, specifically when performing motor skills, you're what's called like overthinking. And so there was studies that sort of looked at this and trying to get an idea of how sort of motor control research, but looking at specifically attention, relates to this whole idea of choking. What is it? Is it like, what is it about the stress of the situation where you have this professional athlete that is able to do the same thing so well all the time, except for like in the last play of the game? And so what research sort of called this was the de-automization of skills hypothesis. And so what they sort of like hypothesized and sort of figured out was that in choking, you as a sort of performer are focusing your attention internally. And when focusing internally, what you're doing is you're ruining the sort of coordination that you've developed with repetition. You're de-automizing that sort of like process, and you are sort of ruining the coordination that you've developed for that particular motor skill. Does that make sense? Because as you get better and better and better at a motor skill, it becomes more and more automatic, right? You can think about it less and less and less, right? So if you start thinking internally, you're ruining that automaticity. Internal focus is good when we're learning a motor skill, but then as you get better and better, you have to think about it less. It becomes more and more automatic, correct? So by overthinking or internally focusing your attention, when it gets stressful, a stressful situation, it can lead to performance detriment and therefore what we call choking in sports. Who would you say, like, give me an example of someone that chokes, an athlete? Who's more recent ones? I don't know. Yeah. Well, at least, yeah. That's yeah. At least Matthews and Martin in the playoffs, yeah. And it only gets worse because as they really want to, like, okay, I really need to do good this time. They stress out even more, and then it causes even more of the internal cycle, which makes it even more worse. So this year, for Austin Matthews, he's thinking about it, right? It's like once a choker, potentially you're always a choker, because even them wanting to not choke more makes it worse. So we'll find out this playoffs. So, and I had mentioned this, I think with Ahmed as well, as you become better and better at something, it tends to become automatic. That process is called automaticity. So as we become better and better at a motor skill, it tends to utilize less attention. So if this is the amount of attention that we have, and this is the amount of attention that like typing will use, or I don't know, give me another example. As I get better and better at a motor skill, the amount of attention decreases. So technically now I can start multitasking with that skill. Remember we were talking about MEG machines and looking at sort of brain waves and activity. There's been studies that are looking at, okay, well, maybe there's a difference as you become better and better at different things, and with multitasking, maybe different parts of the brain are active. And so what they found was that there's actually less brain activity with multitasking, because if it's a skill that you're really good at, it takes less activity or less attention. So in terms of visual selective, in terms of attentional focus, so where we're focusing attention, a lot of research has looked at visual selective attention. Now, we've talked about how to humans, vision, in terms of sensory processes while performing motor skills, is what we seem to sort of like prioritize, correct? So a lot of research has looked at figuring out and studying what people are looking at as they're performing a motor skill, and then comparing that as they get better, or comparing an amateur versus an expert, and trying to understand what are the changes in sort of our visual selective attention. What are we visually sort of selecting to attend to? The process of what we're looking at in the environment is called a visual search. And have we ever heard about this sort of inattention and change blindness example? I'm sure you have seen this. What I want you to do is I want you to look at this video, and I want you to count the number of passes of the people in white.
This is a test of selective attention. Count how many times the players wearing white pass the basketball.
Oh, my ankle. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16.
How many passes did you count? The correct answer is 15 passes. But did you see the gorilla?
Did anyone not see the gorilla? Sam?
This video is from research by Daniel Simons and Christopher Chabris and is copyrighted.
So this is just an example of visual selective attention. So in the video, we were selecting to attend to the players in white. But when we focus our attention, we were missing out on everything else from potentially from in our visual field. Yeah, it's like there's a whole bunch too if you go on YouTube. I remember this one got taken down. I had to use another one time, but it's just sort of an example of visual selective attention, sorry. So that's more based on what you were talking about before, Sam, with your original question, where you're choosing to attend to certain things and you can tend to miss out on other things. And so with this research and researching visual selective attention, researchers that are utilizing these eye movement recording devices. Do you remember this from lecture 4, I think? And what these, let's reiterate it, what these goggles do is it's recording movement of the pupil, so central vision. So they are very good at what people are focusing their central vision on, which is really what's the most important thing. Remember, like central vision is to pick out sort of the regulatory conditions of the environment when performing a motor skill. And a limitation with these goggles would be that you can be aware of things that are happening in the periphery. So it's not tracking peripheral vision, which would be difficult to do. I'm sure maybe in the future there'll be a way to sort of do it, because peripheral vision is able to sort of pick out that things are going to move in the environment. Central vision is the most important, what we're focusing in on. The other thing that these goggles are sort of good at registering is that if we focus on something, we're focusing our attention on something, you are unable to move your eyes without losing attention. Which is you can be having a conversation with someone, if your eyes move, you've lost attention. So, no, it froze. Can you guys see me? Yeah. Oh, perfect. Actually, so for the next time we have in-person lectures, way back in, or I don't know, 2035, I'm going to make everyone wear these goggles, and I'm going to find out what you guys are looking at during the lecture. So, what researchers sort of analyzed is that by using these goggles, what people are looking for, and with experience, is that people are looking for the regulatory conditions of the environment. Right? If they're performing a motor skill, their eyes are going to be focusing in on what in the environment is the most important to add to the motor program to complete that task. So the regulatory conditions. And with experience, you're better able to pick out what from the environment is the most important. Does that make sense? Because a whole bunch of studies have now looked at all bunch of different sports and compared what experts and amateurs look at. And what's the difference? So as a general rule, experts in a particular motor skill can visually attend to less and for a less amount of time because of the experience. They know specifically what to look at, right? So I'm going to go through different studies. There was a study with badminton players, and they were able to, the experts were better able to pick out the sort of serve that was coming up versus amateurs. So they were able to pick out more from the environment in the same amount of time. Soccer players, they did amateurs and professionals. And what they did was that they showed them like sort of a play on the screen. And the professionals were better able and quicker at picking out what the play was versus the amateurs, meaning that visually, subconsciously, they were able to pick out what from the environment was the most important. So studying visual selection became, or is, a really big sort of topic in motor control research, because so much of our vision and what we're picking up from the environment, or what we're choosing to for sort of focus our attention in on, is important with action selection, right? So if I'm going to pick up this cup, let's say I have the eye goggles on, we're going to see that my eyes are going to pick up like, okay, probably the distance from the keyboard, if there's anything in the environment that I need to avoid, how big the cup is. That's going to tell me sort of an estimate of how heavy it's going to be. That information is going to be added to the motor program in action selection. It's going to constrain my motion. And then remember, central vision is very important for timing tasks, for open motor skills, right? We have to move our central vision to the object to get time to contact. This study was looking at the differences between sort of amateur and expert tennis players. And what they found was that the amateurs were looking only just at the ball when trying to prepare for returning a serve, whereas the experts would look at the body of the opponent, the shoulders, then the ball, because they would pick out different information. Baseball players. They found that so they were comparing batters, and the beginners would look at the ball the whole time. So during the windup plus the pitch, whereas experts would be looking at the pitcher's shoulders, arms, and head, and then the ball. And maybe it was so that way they could better figure out what the pitch was coming was. Does that make sense? I've talked about this before. So we were comparing novice and expert or experienced drivers. Beginner drivers are sort of looking at everything. They're trying to take in everything. Their eyes are constantly moving. Whereas experienced drivers look at sort of a smaller number of things for a shorter amount of time. So they're able to multitask because it's taking less attention. There was one researcher, and she's Canadian, who was huge, is huge still in this field. It's Joan Vickers from the University of Calgary in their KINE program. This was 1996. It's a long time ago now, obviously. But what she was doing was looking at the eye goggle machine, and she was looking at athletes for the Canadian women basketball team. And so she was looking at maybe she could look at the difference between what they were looking at. But what she found was that there is a sort of what's called the quiet eye period. There's a moment where right before initiation of movement, the athletes or the performers focus their central vision on the rim. And that she could estimate for when the individual athletes made or missed the free throw based on the amount of time of this final eye fixation. She called that the quiet eye, and it very quickly became understood and researched that quiet eye phenomenon was true of all motor skills. It is the final eye fixation just before the initiation of movement. It's directed to a critical location or object based on the motor skill that you're analyzing. It's a stable fixation of gaze, and it occurs just before the onset of movement. And then as you become better and better at a motor skill, that period of quiet eye, that duration gets longer. So here we have an example of the quiet eye with hockey. Any hockey players? Any goalies?
For a goaltender, looking at the puck as a player shoots seems fairly obvious. Research at the University of Calgary has shown that goaltenders directed about 70% of their fixations to the puck as a player is going through the shooting motion. What is not so obvious is that the amount of time a goaltender spends focusing on the puck can be the difference between making a save and getting scored on. Studies showed that when goaltenders successfully made a save, their final fixation on the puck started sooner and was about 125 milliseconds, or 1/8 of a second, longer than when they got scored on. It may not seem like a long time, but when the puck's flight is only around 200 milliseconds, this last good look at the puck, or quiet eye period, seems to be a crucial indicator of success. A quiet eye period that starts early and has a long duration allows a goaltender to mentally predict where the puck will be going and plan the actions necessary to make the stop. It might also allow them to physically ready themselves for the explosive movements necessary to stop a 3-inch disc of vulcanized rubber that can travel at speeds around 90 miles per hour.
This is the quiet eye with policing. Ah. It's not working. Go.
The Calgary Police Service training facility, where officers hone their skills to make split-second life and death decisions.
You'll see when it blinks in and out, that means he's actually blinking at that time.
Just like the situation in this police training exercise. An officer arrives to find a man standing at a table. The man quickly spins around and the officer is faced with a split-second decision. Shoot or hold your fire. Is that a gun he's holding or just a cell phone? On the range, officers learn how to fire their weapons. In the classroom, Joan Vickers usually works with elite athletes.
The question is, can anyone maintain their focus and their concentration under the extreme pressure of a firearms encounter?
Using an eye tracker device that follows the movements of the eye, Vickers found that elite athletes and police officers fix their sights on a target and don't refocus on their weapon. Vickers discovered what is called the quiet eye.
It's the last thing that you see before you have to make a critical movement. So in this police study, it was what your eye was stable on for at least 100 milliseconds before you pull the trigger. That red cursor that you see, the little one, shows his eye move. Those are fixations when they're stable. And he's trying to figure out left hand, right hand, where exactly is this gun that I told, or this weapon or this problem that I've been told I might have to deal with. When the eye moves across really quick, watch, this is called a saccade when it moves across real quick to the other side. He's going over there waiting for it. Now he knows he's got a serious problem. Right, and he's got about a half a second from this point to deal with this problem.
Vickers' study revealed officers with the quiet eye had more accurate shots and were better able to identify when the weapon was merely a cell phone.
In traditional modes of training, universally, officers and sports people, sports shooters, they're taught to look down at the sights and line the sights up. And then number 3, look up and find the target. Somewhere in becoming an elite performer, and we found this in a number of studies here and in other places, they changed that gaze control. So that if you're one of the best shooters in the world, whether you're an Olympic shooter or you're a police officer, you look up and you find the target.
It's research that could help train police officers.
What Joan's research has done for us is actually put some numbers to it. Really defined that an officer-involved shooting takes place in less than a heartbeat. And there are a number of critical factors that occur in that very, very small time frame that we need to continue embracing in our training program.
Research that has many police departments looking at how they train their recruits. Rick Donkers, CalgaryHerald.com.
So based on this quiet eye idea and research that's looking at what is the difference between a beginner and an expert in a particular motor skill and what they're looking at, you are able to sort of develop a training strategy of, okay, well, the experts look at these sort of things. Maybe you can train that, and you do train that to beginners to sort of maximize their learning. And so that's sort of the developing of visual search strategies, but you can't have what's called a generalized visual training program. I can't teach you what to look at in hockey and then have that translating to sports shooting. It's very sports specific or task specific. The specific things that experts become better at picking out from the environment and what to focus in on is specific to that task. Does that make sense, everyone? Did I lose you all? Oh, wait. Are people talking the whole time? Yeah, crap. People were talking about. Oh, crap. Everyone okay? Perfect. Okay. So that was attention. And now we're going to be just briefly discussing memory. Now, have any of you had any experience in any of your other courses with discussing memory? I'm not sure what biology. This would, I think Intro movement neuroscience, I don't think I'm telling you guys about memory. Psychology, okay, perfect. But if you think about it, memory is just really the sort of fundamental ability of our brain to learn from past experiences. So I remember I did this, therefore I shouldn't do it again, or I should do it again. Like, think about how sort of memory evolved, right? It evolved for organisms to understand that it hurt when I touched fire, don't touch fire again. Memory is the capacity to remember and learn from our past experiences to sort of maximize our life in real time. So the functions of memory from a biological perspective includes the storage of information or storage of memories, the retrieval of those memories, and then being able to take those memories, draw them from our long-term memory, and then apply them to the sort of real-time situation that we're dealing with. So Darius, oh there he is. Darius, what's up, buddy? Thanks for coming to class. So memory is composed of two different functional systems. We have our working or short-term memory. Have we all heard the term short-term memory? It's now called working memory because it's sort of like a workspace. And then we have our long-term memory, which is for the permanent storage of different memories. Oops. There it goes. Okay. So these are our two functional systems. We have our working memory and our long-term memory. Let's first talk about our working memory, which is also called sort of our like executive. It's sort of the workstation where we are interacting with our environment and processing that with our long-term memories and sort of coordinating it. Working memory can also be described as our consciousness, right? Our consciousness is a sort of like what we're aware of, like our mental, like our awareness of self. That is basically our working memory. It composes of our phonological loop. So that's the memory of the short-term memory of words and numbers. Our visual spatial sketchpad is the short-term memory of visually what's going on. And then our central executive is like our consciousness that's coordinating everything. It allows us to function or respond to the demands of the right now situation. So our working memory, like our consciousness, is the critical role in our decision-making, problem-solving, movement planning, and execution of different situations. It's interacting with long-term memory and drawing out previous memories. And it acts as the interactive workspace to take our short-term memory, add that with our long-term memory, and then sort of process and figure out what we want to do in that real time. Now, the three components, like I said, were the phonological loop, the visual spatial sketchpad, and the central executive. With short-term memory or working memory, we basically have a capacity of this workspace to hold information for about 20 to 30 seconds. The capacity of our short-term or working memory is finite. We can hold information of about 7 plus or minus 2 different items. And so the only way to sort of improve our working memory capacity is by chunking or organization. So do you remember how I don't know if I've talked to you all about memory or sort of like how to break down or learn different courses, but the best way is to organize it into smaller components. Because we have a capacity in our short-term memory of the amount of things that we can remember, if we have 100 different items, you're not going to remember that and be able to sort of like work with all of those in your short-term memory at once. You can only do 7 things. So the best way is to take those 100 things and organize them into smaller chunks. It's called chunking. So that's why at the beginning of the lectures, there's all of this information, all of the different slides, so that all of the information is there so that way you can perform well on the midterm. But I do the outline because it's broken the lectures down into 7 to 9 things. That's why I did that, was because it gives you things or sort of categories that you can sort of keep in your short-term memory and sort of relate to how each of the things that you're learning relates to those 7 things. And so, have you all ever, I don't know, I watched it on like a reality show, not a reality show, like on a talk show, where there's people that can memorize like pages, remember like they memorize the whole book in like however long. There's ways to maximize memory, and it's by sort of figuring out ways to, mnemonics, right? You're organizing things to organize it into smaller chunks. So do we all sort of have a better understanding of working memory now, or consciousness, or short-term memory? It's all kind of the same thing. In relation to motor skills, our working memory is really important, right? Because it's our consciousness that we're dealing with the real-time, right now situation, but it's going to be important with allowing us to remember given instructions about a skill. It lasts 20 to 30 seconds, our short-term memory. So, you know, when you're like playing darts and like, oh, that one was a good one. So you kind of like, every time you're doing a trial of a skill you're learning, you kind of change it a little bit. It's allowing you to compare with the previous trial. And then the working memory is allowing us to sort of take memories from our long-term memory and use those memories to affect or consider our real-time situation. So here we have a better idea of consciousness. So the concept of, like, if I was to clone you, Casey, so now there's 2 Caseys, would you have the same consciousness? No, right? The consciousness is sort of all of your experiences and previous and what you're dealing with right now. So our consciousness, or our working memory, here is the central executive. It's going to be coordinating with short-term memory of visual and stored information of like words and numbers, all the sensory information we're attending to in that moment, and the long-term memories. All of that combined is our consciousness. Or working together is our consciousness. Does that make sense, everyone? Awesome. So our long-term memory is a little bit different. This is the permanent storage of our experiences. So it allows people to store all of the information that they have chosen or worked to remember. The duration of our long-term memory isn't 20 to 30 seconds. It's permanent. It's forever. Because there's instances where you've heard of people that have been in comas, or people that have brain injuries, and they're bringing up memories that have happened when they were young or 10 years ago that they've never talked about again, or even they had forgotten. That information, or like, how many of you have all of a sudden just remembered something that happened years and years and years and years ago? Information that we've stored in our long-term memory is never forgotten. The process of forgetting is a retrieval issue, right? So the process of remembering things isn't storing it, it's storing it and learning where to take it out. So when you are studying for courses, it's not that you're forgetting the information that you've learned, you're forgetting how to retrieve it, right? So when practicing studying, when studying and practicing for a test, you have to keep challenging yourself to ask questions and answer them, because you have to keep retrieving the answer from long-term memory. That's what the process of forgetting is about. That's what's called rehearsal, yeah. And then really, the capacity of our long-term memory is unlimited. You can be better at storing information and organizing it, then it becomes easier to retrieve it. But that's exactly, we're going to learn about like sort of the process of remembering. It's about rehearsal. So there's 3 different types of long-term memories. There's our procedural memories, our semantic memories, and our episodic memories. Procedural memories are also called implicit memories, and it is most relevant to sort of this course and us remembering different motor skills. Procedural memories are those things where we can sort of, let's think something like riding a bike. Once you learn to ride a bike, you never really forget it, right? But if I was to ask you, how do you ride a bike, Casey? It's hard to sort of like explicitly say it, right? You have to show the person, okay, this is how you do it, right? You know what to do. So that's called a procedural memory. It's implicit. It's difficult to verbalize, but it's most it's the most relevant to motor skills. The other 2 types of memories are called declarative or explicit memories. Semantic memories are our storage of general ideas or knowledge about facts and different concepts. So that would be like our academia, like studying. Episodic memories are our memories of all of the sensory processes of a specific event that we've experienced. So let's all think about something that is very important to you. So how many of you remember your old pet and the way that they smelled, or the sounds that they sounded like, or you think about like your 19th birthday and the smell of your crush's cologne or perfume, or the music that was playing, right? Episodic memories are sort of all of the sensory experiences of that moment. We memorize that, we remember that. So with Ahmed talking about traumas, when you have had a significant trauma, think about a car accident. You can remember the smell of the airbags, the heat of the sun when you crashed, the sound, the music that was playing, right? It's because it's irrelevant to you. You're remembering all of the episode of that memory. Does that make sense? Semantic and episodic memories are easy to verbalize, so they're called explicit memories. You can explicitly talk about them, whereas procedural memories are called implicit. So it's hard to sort of recall specifically what to do, but you remember, you know how to do them. So now that we understand different memories, right? And so the ability of remembering and therefore forgetting is the opposite, involves our ability to encode information and store it in long-term memory. To better or to maximize long-term memory, you have to organize the information and package it in a way with more and more sort of like, remember I was talking about how when you get the textbook, it gives you more of information around the same topic versus just a line in the lecture slides. You're expanding the amount of information or your general knowledge of the concept to better store it in, or to better organize it in your long-term memory. The process of remembering is rehearsing and of retrieving that information from the long-term memory. It's exactly what Casey said. So researchers looked at sort of assessing remembering and forgetting. And the best way to do that is through, for explicit memories, or explicit memory tests. So that's what we do in academia. We do recall and recognition tests. Recall tests are like fill in the blank or short answer, where you have to recall the information specifically. Whereas recognition tests, just like our midterm, is like multiple choice, where you're asking to recognize the answer or the information you want to remember from a list. Implicit memory tests are a lot more difficult, right? So if I was to ask you, how do you prove to me that you know how to ride a bike? It's hard to sort of verbalize. You have to get someone to show you, right? Just a couple more slides. Is everyone okay so far? So research has wanted to look at, okay, well, now that we get an idea of how sort of the structure of what memory is like and the process of remembering and therefore forgetting, what are some of the causes of forgetting then? Like, what are some of the things that to consider so that way we can maximize learning for individuals? And so what researchers looked at is that, let's say we're talking about JP. So JP, I'm going to test your memory of something. What you do is you could add in proactive or retroactive interference. So I want you to remember this list of words and I'm going to give you the words. Okay, that's going to be the test. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a list of another words before, or I'm going to make you watch a video or sing a song before I give you the list of words to remember. So if I give it to you before, that's called proactive interference. If I give you the list to remember, then I play you a video or have you stand on your head or who knows, something. That would be retroactive interference. And what research has shown is that if you are presented with interference that closely matches what you're trying to remember, there will be a problem. If I give you a list of 10 words, here, read these words. Now here's a list of words of 10 words to memorize. You're gonna probably screw up because the interference very much matches what you're trying to remember. And so it's gonna lead to a problem of organization to put into your long-term memory. Does that make sense? Perfect. The other thing that researchers have found is that continuous skills, because like the repetitions of the same thing, they tend to be remembered much better than discrete skills. So let's talk about some of the other variables that have been sort of determined when looking at sort of remembering. So one thing that research has shown is that humans are much better at remembering endpoint. So location and location characteristics versus movement. So think about any personal trainers in the class? So if I wanted to show someone how to do a bench press, so I'm going to have them like lining down like this, right? Also shoulder press or whatever, right? I'm going to say, okay, the motion and what you want to do is you're going to bring your arms here. So I'm going to grab the arms, you're going to go from here, and then you can go to there. So I show them the beginning and the end. In rehab, when I'm trying to show someone a stretch or a exercise, I'm going to say you're going to go from here to there. Humans are better at remembering endpoints than if I was to take their arm and say, nope, this is the motion I want you to do. It leads to humans have a harder time remembering movement characteristics solely than endpoints. Who was the dancer in the class? There was a bunch of you guys. When learning new dance moves, do you learn probably through endpoints, right? Yeah, it's just for whatever what's your sport, Matthew? Oh, you're a dancer. Okay. So can you think of an instance of how endpoints are easier to remember? Because I don't know, you're gonna do so you start with this. So you're gonna go from here to here. No, what's the new dance? It's like whatever. Yeah. But think about it. Now that I've stated that's been proven in research, you're gonna pick it out. Can anyone think of any other examples? Yeah. The other thing that allows people to remember better is that if you give them meaningfulness of the movement. But we're talking about motor skills here, right? So if I give someone sort of imagery or attach a label that gives them meaningfulness or a better idea or visual or mental picture of the movement, it's like an ability, or it gives them the ability to learn it better. So giving a sort of visual imagery or a label. Think about any golfers in the class? if I was to say to you, okay, so I want to teach someone how to swing a golf club, right? Would it be easier to go, okay, so you're going to move from here to there, or I want you to go from here to there, and imagine your arms as a clock face. You're going to go from 6 to 2 and back to 6. So you give someone visual imagery of the movement. It can add to their understanding of the motor skill. Alexis is saying something. She's saying, when I'm coaching middle-aged women doing hip hop, doing the hip hinge, I cue them to imagine they're holding. Yeah, exactly like that. So then you're giving them visual imagery, right? Because you could show them the endpoints and they're like, okay, I kind of get it. But if you tell them of sort of like a visual, give them a visual, it gives them better understanding. Does that make sense, everyone? You can also do it with verbal labels, but the verbal label has to be relevant to the. You can't just say, just like, here's a word of this movement. It has to mean something. The last thing, are we all okay, everyone? The last thing I didn't get to with the other class that is really, really interesting is this concept of short-term memory. Have you all ever heard of this case of Clive Wearing? It was a gentleman who had a brain injury, and he lost part of his brain that was involved with short-term memory. So he doesn't have working memory in a sense. He only has long-term memories. So let's see if I can stop sharing here. Oh no, I have to present it, I guess, right? How to do this? Stop presenting. Open visual. Play this. Share screen. Oh, here. Let me just show you this video. It's kind of long. Yeah, but he has all of his previous long-term memories. Do you want me to play the video? Tell me to play the video. Share entire screen. Okay, perfect. Here we go.
You know how we got here? You don't remember sitting down?
No.
I reckon we've been here about 10 minutes at least.
Well, I have no knowledge of the man. As I started working now, all I've seen the whole time I've been sitting in before is that.
And you feel absolutely normal?
Not absolutely normal, no. Completely confused.
Confused?
Yes. You've never eaten anything, never tasted anything, never touched anything, smelled anything. What right have you seen in your life?
But you are?
Not that, yes. But I'd like to know what the hell's been going on.
Clive is an outstanding musician.
You would take his way very seriously. At the same time, he loved music so much that he just really threw himself into it totally.
Clive was a musician of enormous integrity.
He was the world's expert on lasses, one of the beautiful great composers of the Renaissance.
And he also worked a great deal in contemporary music. Chorus master of the London Sinfonietta.
So this is a famous guy.
Europe's foremost group.
Music flows out of him, whether he's singing or playing or conducting.
Clive Waring, through a cruel twist of fortune, shows us how fundamental consciousness and memory are to our lives.
So every time he sees his wife, it's like the first time because he doesn't remember seeing her last. This is a long-term memory. Yeah, that's fine. I'm not gonna hide. So we got my emails, clinic schedule, clinic emails, my schedule.
So how are you feeling?
Unconscious. It's the first time I've seen anybody.
You've not been conscious before? I've been here before this
I haven't
morning.
seen you.
You haven't?
I've not seen anything at all. I'm completely blind all the time. No test. So this is the first test.
That's the first coffee you've had?
Yes. Yes.
Cheers. How are you seeing things?
Absolutely normal. First time. Yes. I've never seen anything the whole time I've been ill. No black and white, nothing.
Do you remember me arriving?
No. I don't remember any arrivals. I don't remember writing anything. Nothing to do with me. Unconscious writing.
What's he doing here?
I don't know if it's impressions, but I mean, that's the first time I've seen any cards.
Is it?
Yes.
Do you remember starting again? It all started with a headache. Clive came home one day and said he had a very bad headache. The headache didn't lift, it didn't respond to analgesics. By the fourth day, he developed quite a high fever. And on the evening of the fourth day, for a little while, he forgot his daughter's name. By the fifth day, he was very delirious.
I've suffered from viral encephalitis, which has led to the damage of the left and the right temporal lobes, plus a good portion of the left frontal lobe. Now, the temporal lobes contain a structure called the hippocampus, which we know is implicated in memory function, and in Clive it has almost certainly been completely destroyed in both sides of his brain. It's this that's primarily responsible for his severe memory impairment. In addition, the damage to his frontal lobes also causes a number of additional memory problems, which are manifest mostly in terms of him repeating himself a lot and generally showing highly emotional behavior.
Clive's world now consists of a moment with no past to anchor it and no future to look ahead to. It is a blinkered moment. He sees what is right in front of him, but as soon as that information hits the brain, it fades. Nothing makes an impression, nothing registers. Everything goes in perfectly well because he has all his faculties, his intellect is virtually intact, and he perceives his world as you or I do. But as soon as he's perceived it and looked away, it's gone for him. So it's a moment-to-moment consciousness, as it were, a time vacuum. And everything before that moment is completely void. And he feels as if he's awakening afresh the whole time.
I haven't been. Maybe 1 night, 2.5 years long. So good. Not seen anything true now. Not seen anything before this game. I get the impression of being stupid.
He always thinks he's been awake for about 2 minutes. And that's why he looks at his watch all the time to record it. To record the fact, I've woken up.
Well, I don't know, Farah, like,
therefore I will write it down.
Usually
So
in these instances, it's like 40 to 1 in terms of the.
I am now completely awake for the first time. And he underlines first time.
The vote.
Patience begins, because he's always playing patience. And the whole
It wasn't
diary,
unanimous like the
every
other
page is
course.
special adventure saying
What would be your
almost
reasoning to having
the
pushed
same
back?
thing.
Do the
Of first
midterm on
awakeness And
Thursday?
when he goes back and looks at his own entries, he doesn't acknowledge that they are genuine. He says he knows it's his handwriting, but as far as he's concerned, he was unconscious
So then
when
what else?
he wrote.
Well, I don't mind. It's up to
So
you. Everyone
quite
else.
often he'll score out what he's written before, and so his life is an ever-repeating moment of first awakening. The strongest thing in his life, I believe, his diaries bear that out, is his love for me. And that's absolutely raw. And each time I walk into that room, it is as if it's the first time he's seen me for years.
Okay. Wait, so watch the video. This is about Clive, like I said, short-term memory loss. Now, for all of you, what do you want? So then, okay, so there's 41 people in this chat, so let's all vote. Just go vote right now. So there's 41 people in here and only 33 votes. Okay. Are everyone okay with that? Yeah. Okay. 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 I'm going to keep the midterm. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Darius, your camera's on. Okay, so we'll keep it the same then. Remember, the breakdown of the midterm is listed, so you can figure out of the lectures, of the 6, which ones are the most important. I don't think that it's too difficult. The question format's going to be very, very, if not exactly the same as the sample questions that are provided, the 10. Any questions, email me. And then the midterm will be next week during class time through Respondus browser and monitor. Okay, everyone? If you have any concerns, please email me. And like I said, always enjoy having a class with you. And I will see you all next week. Not through this, but in your mind. Episodic memory. Bye, everyone.